Listen up, chosen ones. The world wasn't built for people like us. You weren't made to blend in. You were created to stand out, to carry burdens others can't even imagine. This message is for the warriors, the survivors, the ones who keep fighting when everyone else has given up. If you've ever felt the weight of expectations crushing down on you, if you've ever had to be strong when you were breaking inside, this is for you. The sharpest steel is forged in the hottest fire, but even steel bends before it breaks. Ever wonder what happens when someone who's always been strong finally reaches their breaking point? What occurs when a person who's carried the weight of worlds finally lets a tear fall? It's not just emotion, it's power. And that power doesn't fade away. It transforms. Think about it. A lion doesn't roar without reason. A storm doesn't gather just to pass by. When the strongest among us finally break, the world listens, even if it pretends not to. Your tears aren't just water and salt. They're warning shots, signals to those who thought you could be controlled, broken, or silenced. And when that signal is sent, it's already too late for them. If you've ever felt this fire burning inside you, hit that subscribe button right now and drop 777 in the comments, because real ones recognize real. Stay locked in. What comes next isn't just a story. It's a warning. They thought they could push you to the edge and walk away unharmed. They forgot that even the mightiest hurricane starts with a single raindrop. People mistake your silence for surrender, your endurance for weakness, your restraint for submission. That's their first mistake. When a chosen one reaches their breaking point, it's not just a moment of personal pain, it's the trigger for something the world can't control. Your breaking point isn't an end. It's the first crack in the dam before the flood rushes in and sweeps everything away. Each tear you shed carries the weight of every battle fought in silence, every betrayal swallowed, every sacrifice made without thanks. Your tears aren't just water. They're the boiling rage of all the moments you stayed quiet when you should have burned everything down. Reality itself shifts when a chosen one cries. The air gets heavier. The atmosphere tenses like the hush before a storm, like the stillness before a wildfire roars to life. People around you feel it, even if they don't understand it. A sudden tightness in their chest, a strange feeling of déjà vu, a creeping sense that something fundamental is about to change forever. The ones who underestimated you start to question themselves. The ones who mocked you suddenly find words caught in their throats. Because a chosen one's sorrow is never just sorrow. It's a force that leaves its mark on the world. Those who pushed you too far will watch as their illusions crumble. They thought they had power over you. They thought they could break you and walk away untouched. But nothing is ever the same after making a chosen one cry. They should have been smarter. They should have known that no fire can burn forever without consuming what surrounds it. No storm rages without reshaping the land beneath it. They thought they could control what was never theirs to control. This isn't just grief. This is the world bending to the emotional force of someone it cannot afford to lose. They never feared your strength. They feared the day you realized it wasn't your armor. It was your weapon. The world builds lies around people like us. Stories where we can never fall, never bend, never break. They need us to be invincible, not because they admire our strength, but because they fear what happens when we show weakness. The moment a chosen one sheds a tear, the illusion cracks. People stop. They stare. They question everything they thought they knew. If someone like you can break, then what does that mean for everyone else? If even you have a breaking point, how fragile must the rest of them be? That fear is justified. Your tears don't signal defeat. They signal change, a shift, a fracture in the system that once held you in place. You were never just strong because you endured. You were strong because you carried more than most could handle. When the weight finally bears down too heavy, when tears finally fall, it isn't weakness showing through. It's the sound of chains snapping. People worship the idea of an unshakable force, but they don't know what to do when that force feels pain, when it bleeds, when it reminds them that strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about surviving every hit and still standing. They wanted you to stay silent, to swallow the pain, to keep playing the role of the unbreakable. Because if they see your struggle, they'd have to admit the truth. They were never as strong as you. When they see you cry, they'll realize something terrifying. This isn't you losing. This is you transforming. The world isn't afraid of a chosen one's strength. It's afraid of what happens when that strength stops holding back. They thought your tears were weakness until they realized they were the spark that set everything on fire. Most people cry and move on. They wipe their tears, take a deep breath, and pretend nothing happened. But not you. Not a chosen one. Your tears don't just fall. They strike. They don't just express pain. They rewrite reality. People don't see it at first. They think you're just breaking, just unraveling under pressure. What they fail to understand is that your breaking point is never just an ending. It's a beginning. Once the first tear falls, the ripple effect begins. Your pain doesn't disappear into silence. It echoes. It spreads, shifting everything in its path. Maybe it starts subtly. A shift in energy, a tension in the air, an unease even your enemies can't explain. Then the cracks begin to show. Your tears do what words never could. They force truths to the surface, exposing what's been hidden for too long. Lies collapse under their own weight. Masks slip. The illusions that once stood strong start to crumble. Maybe it's a person realizing they were never as powerful as they thought. Maybe it's a system cracking under the pressure of a single, undeniable truth. Maybe it's the quiet whisper of rebellion igniting in those who never dared speak before. A chosen one's tears don't just cleanse, they carve. They erase weakness. They dissolve illusions and leave only what's real. The ones who pushed you to this point, the ones who thought breaking you was their victory, they were playing with fire, but they didn't realize it until the flames were already rising around them. They didn't expect the fallout. They didn't expect the shift. They thought they could control what happens when you reach your limit. But they never understood that a chosen one's sorrow is never just sorrow. It's a force. One tear is all it takes. One moment of vulnerability is enough to awaken what should have stayed buried, or bring down what once stood unshaken. Once that ripple starts, nothing and no one can stop what comes next. They thought breaking you would be simple. They forgot that even the smallest crack in the earth can unleash a disaster no one can control. When a chosen one cries, it's never just emotion. It's a force, a shift, a rupture in reality itself. Those who stood back and watched you suffer, the ones who thought their words, their actions, their betrayals would break you in silence. They never considered the storm that follows. They never imagined that your grief wouldn't just stay buried inside, but would rise, expand, and consume everything around it. Your emotions aren't just feelings. They are pressure. They are movement. They are power. When that pressure builds for too long, when the dam inside you is forced to hold too much, it doesn't break quietly. It doesn't slip away unnoticed. It erupts. Maybe it starts small, a sudden change in the air, an unnatural silence, a shift in energy that makes even those who don't understand you uneasy. Then the world reacts. The sky darkens. The winds change. The atmosphere grows heavier, as if it too is preparing for something inevitable. The moment your pain spills over, nature itself listens. Thunder rolls in like a battle cry. Lightning carves through the sky like jagged scars. Rain doesn't just fall, it drowns. And if there is no storm, the silence is even worse. No birds, no rustling leaves, no movement. Just a deep, suffocating stillness, as if the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. This is what happens when the unbreakable breaks. It's never just about one moment of sorrow. It's about the weight behind it. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every forced sacrifice is packed into the tears you refuse to shed. But when they finally fall, the ones who caused them will understand exactly how much damage they've done. They should have known better. They should have walked carefully. They should have realized that pushing a chosen one too far doesn't end with silence. It ends with reckoning. They cheer for you when you rise, but disappear when you fall. They admire the fire, but never ask what it costs to burn this bright. Being chosen is not a gift. It's a sentence. A life where the weight on your shoulders is invisible to everyone but you. To the world, you're a symbol of strength, of hope, of something greater than yourself. They see what they want to see, a force, a legend, a leader. But what they don't see is the exhaustion behind your eyes. The nights when you wish, just for a moment, that someone else could carry the weight. They call you powerful, but they never ask what that power has cost you. They expect you to be unbreakable, but they never wonder how many times you've had to rebuild yourself from the ground up. To them, you're not a person. You're an expectation, a role to be filled, a duty to be carried, a light they demand but never replenish. And here's the cruelest part. They judge your weakness. If you ever fall, they don't rush to catch you. They step back, waiting to see if you'll rise again. Because that's what they need you to do. That's what they expect. So when a chosen one cries, it isn't just sadness. It's the sound of a breaking point no one saw coming. It's the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, 1,000 sacrifices, 1,000 moments of standing alone. Each tear is a rebellion against the chains of expectation, a scream against the lie that you must always be strong, always be steady, always be more than human. But here's the truth they don't want to admit. Even the strongest get tired. Even the unstoppable wish for just a moment that they could stop. And yet they never will. Because the world may never see the burden, may never understand the cost, but the chosen one does. And despite it all, despite the exhaustion, the loneliness, the weight that never lessens, they still stand. They thought your pain was harmless, just another passing storm. But some storms don't pass. They leave nothing standing. A chosen one's tears are never just tears. To the world, they may seem like something rare, something almost magical, a symbol of purity, of power, of something greater than ordinary emotion. Some believe they can heal, cleanse, or even reveal hidden truths. They see them as a gift, a force of hope. But those who truly understand, they know better. Because for the chosen one, their own tears might be their greatest curse. Every drop carries more than just sorrow. It holds everything they've suppressed, everything they've endured, everything they've lost. And the terrifying truth? Those tears don't just fall. They do something. They stir the world. They shift the ground. They wake things better left undisturbed. Crying for most is a release. But for a chosen one, it's a risk, a gamble. Will it bring light, or will it bring destruction? Will it mend what's broken, or will it rip apart what's barely holding together? The weight of that uncertainty makes every tear feel like a blade hanging by a thread. One wrong moment, one slip, and everything they've built could collapse. Maybe they've heard the warnings, stories whispered in fear about those who came before them, those whose grief was so deep, so raw, that it cracked the sky, those whose sorrow swallowed entire cities, whose rage turned oceans into graveyards. Maybe they've been told that their pain, if let loose, could summon something unstoppable, something ancient, something that should have never been awakened. So they hold it in. They grip their emotions like a weapon they refuse to fire, afraid of what might happen if they do. They smile when they should scream. They keep walking when they should fall. They act like they're fine because the cost of breaking is too high. But when that control finally slips, when the dam finally bursts, the world will learn the truth. Because a chosen one's pain doesn't vanish. It reshapes everything it touches. And that's the real curse, knowing that the one thing that could bring them relief might also be the thing that turns everything they love into ash. They built the chains thinking you'd never question them. But they forgot chains aren't just meant to bind, they're meant to break. Being chosen isn't just a path, it's a prison made of expectations, forged by the hands of those who will never carry what you do. They decide who you must be, strong, flawless, always capable of withstanding the unbearable. They don't see you as a person, they see you as a symbol. And symbols aren't allowed to crack. But here's the truth they fear. The unbreakable is only unbreakable until it isn't. They stack the weight higher, expecting you to hold it all. They demand resilience, sacrifice, perfection, because the idea of you falling terrifies them. If you can break, what does that say about the rest of them? So they pretend you can't. They silence your pain before you can even voice it. They mistake your endurance for an obligation, your silence for agreement. They convince themselves that because you can carry the weight, you should. But what happens when the weight becomes too much? Your tears aren't just sadness, they're rebellion, a silent war cry against the impossible standards forced upon you. When you finally let go, it isn't just emotion, it's defiance. It's every fear, every doubt, every exhausted breath that they told you to swallow, finally rising to the surface. It's a declaration. I am not invincible, and I never was. And that truth, it shakes them, because for the first time, they have to face what they've refused to see. They depended on your strength without ever considering the cost. They admired the armor without questioning the scars underneath. They wanted the hero, but never cared about the human. Because when a chosen one cries, it isn't weakness. It's a reckoning. It's the illusion of perfection shattering before their eyes. It's a reminder that even those they put on pedestals bleed, break, and suffer. And in that moment, you don't lose power. You take it back. So let them watch. Let them feel the discomfort of knowing they were wrong. Because your tears are more than just a release. They're a statement. a refusal, a warning. They built you up so they could break you down. But when the cracks form, it's their illusions that shatter first. They never saw you as a person. You were a symbol, a pillar of strength, an idea they could cling to. They needed you to be invincible because their own weakness terrified them. As long as you stood tall, they could pretend they were strong too. As long as you never wavered, they could ignore their own fears. But the moment you break, the moment they see the cracks in your armor, everything shifts. Your tears don't just fall, they expose. They force those around you to look in the mirror, to see themselves for what they really are. The ones who put you on a pedestal suddenly realize they never admired you. They admired what you represented. And when that image crumbles, when they're forced to see you as human, it shakes them to their core. Because if even you can fall, what does that say about them? It's easy for them to praise you when you're strong. It's easy to follow someone who never falters. But when they see you break, they don't feel sympathy. They feel betrayed. Not because they care about your pain, but because it ruins the story they told themselves. It strips away the comfort of believing that someone else would always hold the weight they were too afraid to carry. And that's the real hypocrisy. They loved you when you were unshakable. They stood beside you when you were winning. But when your pain became too real, when you showed the weight of everything you carried, they flinched. They looked away. They whispered that maybe you were never as strong as they thought. But here's what they don't understand. Your pain isn't weakness. Your tears aren't surrender. They are a reckoning. Because when a chosen one breaks, it forces everyone around them to face the truth. They were never strong enough to stand where you stood. They never carried the burden you carried. They never sacrificed what you did. They only took, expecting you to hold everything without question. But now they have to watch. Watch as the illusion shatters. Watch as the weight they forced on you crushes their own excuses. Watch as they realize they never deserved to stand beside you in the first place. Your tears don't just reveal your pain, they expose the world's deception. Society celebrates strength, but punishes vulnerability. They tell you to be authentic, but only if that authenticity fits their expectations. They want you to be real, but only the parts of real they're comfortable seeing. When a chosen one finally breaks, it doesn't just crack their facade. It shatters the entire illusion we've built around power, success, and strength. The world wants heroes who never bleed, leaders who never doubt, warriors who never tire. They want the benefits of your power without acknowledging the humanity that comes with it. They've created a system where showing emotion is weakness, where asking for help is failure, where admitting you're tired means you're not worthy of your position. But your tears, they wash away those lies. They force recognition of a simple truth. Even mountains erode. Even the strongest steel will bend. Even the brightest flames need fuel. Your vulnerability doesn't make you less. It completes you. It makes you whole in a world that only wants pieces. It makes you true in a landscape of carefully constructed facades. This is why your tears terrify them. Not because they show weakness, but because they expose the lie at the heart of our world, that anyone can be invincible. That pain can be ignored indefinitely. That strength means never falling. When you finally break, you don't just release your own burden. You liberate everyone watching. You give permission to the silent sufferers. You become proof that feeling deeply doesn't diminish power. It defines it. And those who mocked your pain, those who turned away when you needed them most, they weren't rejecting your weakness. They were rejecting the mirror you held up to their own humanity, the parts of themselves they've been running from all along. They called you untouchable. They thought you were made of stone. But when they finally see you bleed, it won't be weakness they witness. It'll be a war cry. They built you up, didn't they? Raised you higher and higher, expecting you to stand tall no matter what. They loved you when you were invincible, when you never faltered, when you carried the weight of everything without complaint. But the second you show even a flicker of vulnerability, suddenly they don't know what to do with you. That's their second mistake, because when a chosen one sheds a tear, it doesn't make them weak. It makes them dangerous. People love to put the strongest among us on pedestals. It's easier that way. If they convince themselves you're something beyond human, they don't have to feel guilty for the way they pile expectations on your back. They don't have to ask if you're okay. They don't have to wonder if they've pushed you too far. Because in their eyes, you don't break, you just endure. But the moment that illusion shatters, the moment they see you feel, really feel, everything changes. Your tears don't lower you. They remind the world that you are not some distant force, untouchable and unaffected. You are real. You have bled for this path. You have sacrificed more than they will ever understand. You have carried a burden so heavy that even steel would crack under the weight. And yet here you are, still standing. That's the part that scares them. They thought your strength came from never bending, never breaking, never letting them see you fall. But now they see the truth. Your strength comes from getting back up, from feeling everything, taking every hit, every betrayal, every loss, and still moving forward. That's not weakness. That's power on a level they will never reach. And now, they have to face the reality they've ignored for too long. You are not their perfect, unshakable figurehead. You are not some cold, emotionless force existing only to meet their expectations. You are something far more dangerous. You are human. And there is nothing more powerful, nothing more unstoppable than someone who has felt everything and survived it. They expected you to endure in silence. They never thought your pain would make the ground shift beneath their feet. There's something unsettling about watching the unbreakable break. The ones who stood tall when others crumbled. The ones who carried burdens too heavy for most to even understand. And then one day, the weight becomes too much. The walls crack. The tears fall. And suddenly, the people who once relied on your strength aren't just witnesses, they're forced to feel it. Your pain isn't just your own. It ripples outward, breaking through the barriers people built around their own emotions. Even those who stood against you, who dismissed you, who resented you, when they see you fall, something inside them shifts. They see, maybe for the first time, that power doesn't mean being untouchable. It means feeling every wound and still choosing to rise. And that realization, it spreads like wildfire. Hatred weakens. Pride falters. The grudges, the divisions, the petty wars, they all start to look small in the face of something real. Because at that moment, your pain is a mirror, and everyone looking at it is forced to confront their own reflection. They see their own regrets, their own unspoken grief, the humanity they tried so hard to suppress. It doesn't matter what side they stood on before. It doesn't matter what lines were drawn in the sand. The moment a chosen one sheds a tear, the game changes. Enemies pause. Rivals hesitate. Some will reach out without even realizing why, as if their own soul is telling them, enough. And just like that, the battle they were so certain about suddenly feels meaningless. The person they once saw as a threat now looks more like a reflection of their own struggles. But make no mistake, this shift isn't weakness. It's the most dangerous kind of power. Because when the right person feels your pain, when the right mind begins to question the war they're fighting, the entire balance of power shifts. Alliances crumble, loyalties flip. Conflicts that seem set in stone start to break apart at the seams. They thought they had control over you. They thought pushing you to the edge would only silence you. But what they never realized is this: your suffering doesn't just weaken you. It forces the world to wake up. They thought they buried you, but they didn't know you were a seed. A chosen one's tears aren't just the end of something. They are the beginning of something far more dangerous. The moment the world thinks they've broken you, that's the moment they should start running. Because your pain doesn't just sit there. It doesn't rot. It doesn't fade into nothing. It burns. It strips away everything soft, everything naive, everything that no longer serves you. And from that fire, something new rises. When you cry, it isn't weakness. It's the sound of the old version of you being torn apart piece by piece. Every illusion you once clung to, every false hope, every moment of doubt, gone, left behind in the wreckage of who you used to be. Because there comes a point where softness becomes a liability, where dreaming of peace is nothing but a distraction, where believing in the kindness of the world is the fastest way to get destroyed. So you evolve. And evolution is never gentle. This is not about survival. This is about transformation. You are not just enduring pain. You are becoming something because of it. Your suffering forges something inside you that no one else will ever understand. They will see the change. They will feel the shift. But they will never comprehend what it cost, because they weren't there. They weren't the ones carrying the weight. They weren't the ones drowning under the expectations, the betrayals, the silence. They will only see what emerges. Sharper, colder, unstoppable. And when they look into your eyes, they will realize too late. They didn't break you. They built you. The mistake they made? Thinking the pain would finish you. Thinking that making you cry would make you weak. Thinking you would stay down. But what they failed to see is that chosen ones don't fall apart. They shed. They evolve. They become something their enemies never saw coming. A force beyond control. A storm with no mercy. A fire that consumes everything in its path. So let them think you've been defeated. Let them believe you're finished. They will soon learn that the most terrifying thing in this world is a chosen one who has nothing left to lose. And just like that, the story changes. The ones who thought they crushed you will soon realize they only sharpened you. This isn't the end. This is the moment where everything shifts. Because when a chosen one rises from the ashes, they don't return the same. They come back stronger, colder, unstoppable. And those who once stood against them, they won't stand for much longer. They call it breaking, but breaking implies an end. What happens to a chosen one isn't an ending, it's a transformation. Scientists tell us that crying isn't just emotional, it's biological. A reset, a release of chemicals that signal change. But what happens when that reset isn't just personal? What happens when your pain is so deep, so raw, that reality itself feels it? Think about the storms that gather inside you, the pressure that builds with every expectation, every battle, every moment you stayed standing when anyone else would have fallen. That energy doesn't disappear. It converts. It waits. And when it finally breaks free, that's when the world remembers why they should have treated you gently. Your tears carry more than sadness. They carry power, raw, unfiltered, unstoppable. The power you've been holding back all this time. The strength you've been using to keep yourself contained rather than to reshape the world around you. When that containment fails, when the dam finally breaks, it's not destruction that follows. It's creation. The creation of something new. Something that was always inside you, waiting for the moment when you finally let go of who you thought you should be and embraced who you were meant to become. The world fears this moment not because it ends you, but because it unleashes your true potential. The version of you that isn't constrained by their expectations. The version that doesn't play by their rules or accept their limitations. This is why they work so hard to keep you from breaking. Not to protect you, but to protect themselves from what you might become when you're finally free. If you've made it this far, if these words resonate in your soul, then you know. You know what it means to stand when others fall, to fight when others flee, to carry what others can barely lift. You know the weight of being chosen. And maybe right now, you're close to your breaking point. Maybe you feel the cracks spreading, the pressure building, the tears threatening to fall. Don't fear it. Don't fight it. What waits on the other side isn't weakness, it's rebirth. The world that pushed you to this edge will soon understand exactly what happens when a chosen one's tears finally fall. They thought they were extinguishing a flame. They never realized they were feeding a wildfire. You weren't chosen because you were unbreakable. You were chosen because even when broken, you become something more powerful than anyone could imagine. Let them think they've won. Let them believe they've crushed your spirit. If you've ever felt this fire inside you, if you know what it means to endure and transform, don't just read these words, act on them. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel and join others who understand this journey. Drop 777 in the comments to let us know you're one of us, a chosen one who recognizes the truth. The storm is coming, and they have no idea what's about to hit them. Stay locked in. What comes next isn't just content, it's confirmation of everything you felt but couldn't name. This isn't just a message, it's a gathering of forces. And remember, chosen one, your tears aren't your ending. They're just the beginning of what you were always meant to become.